Hi, friends. Welcome back to Stay Anchored Kids. Last time, we learned about the burning bush and how God called Moses to go back to Egypt and rescue the Israelites from slavery. Can you imagine hearing that? After 40 years away from Egypt, God was asking Moses to go back and stand before Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler in the world. You might think Moses would say, "Yes, Lord, let's go." But that's not what happened. Instead, Moses started making excuses. Have you ever done that? Maybe your parents asked you to clean your room, or your teacher asked you to answer a question, or someone asked you to help with something difficult. Sometimes it's easier to make excuses than to step out in faith. That's exactly what Moses did. First, Moses asked, "What if the Israelites don't believe me?" So God showed Moses a miracle. God told him to throw his shepherd's staff on the ground. The moment Moses did, the staff became a snake. Can you imagine jumping backward? Then God told Moses to pick the snake up by its tail. That probably sounded like a terrible idea. But Moses obeyed. And as soon as he picked it up, it became a staff again. Then God gave Moses another sign. He told him to place his hand inside his cloak. When Moses pulled it out, his hand was covered with a terrible skin disease. God told him to put it back inside his cloak. When he pulled it out again, his hand was completely healthy. These miracles would help show the Israelites that God had truly sent Moses. But Moses still wasn't convinced. He gave another excuse. He said, "Lord, I'm not a good speaker." Maybe Moses had a speech problem, or maybe he simply lacked confidence. Either way, Moses believed someone else would do a better job. Can you relate to that? Sometimes we compare ourselves to other people. We think, "I'm not smart enough. I'm not talented enough. Someone else could do this better." But listen to what God said to Moses. Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them able to speak? I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. What an amazing answer. God wasn't asking Moses to rely on his own ability. He was asking Moses to rely on God's power. But Moses still had one more excuse. Finally, he said, "Please send someone else." This time, God became angry. Not because Moses had questions. God isn't upset when we ask honest questions. But Moses wasn't just asking questions anymore. He was refusing to obey. So God graciously provided help. He told Moses that his brother Aaron would go with him and help him speak. God was being patient with Moses. But the mission hadn't changed. Moses still had to obey. Now here's today's big question. Why does God ask us to do things that seem too hard? Because if we could do everything on our own, we wouldn't need to trust him. Think about David facing Goliath, Noah building the ark, Esther standing before the king, the disciples telling people about Jesus. Again and again, God called ordinary people to do things that seemed impossible. Why? So everyone would know that the power came from God. And that's still true today. God doesn't usually call the people who think they're the strongest. He often calls people who know they need his help. Here's an apologetics question for today. Some people say, if God really speaks to people, why doesn't he just force them to obey? Because God created us with the ability to make real choices. God invited Moses to obey. He encouraged him. He answered his questions. He gave him signs. But Moses still had to choose. God desires willing obedience, not forced obedience. The same is true for us. Every day, God gives us opportunities to trust him and follow him. Before we finish today, remember this truth. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies those he calls. If God asks you to do something, he will also give you the strength you need to obey him. All right, friends, thanks for joining me today. Tomorrow, we're going to watch Moses and Aaron return to Egypt and stand before Pharaoh for the very first time. Before you go, here's today's challenge. Think about this question or ask your parents or someone you trust. What's one excuse you sometimes make that keeps you from doing what's right? And let's finish with a quick prayer. God, thank you for being patient with us. Help us stop making excuses and start trusting you. Give us courage to obey you, even when something feels difficult or scary. We know that your strength is greater than our weakness. Amen. See you next time, friends.